years ago, we were just discussing, probably 12 or 15 years ago, we had put together a proposal to the school board to add on a gymnasium here, some extra classrooms, a community room, kitchen, and things like that. And they seemed very receptive at the time, and then decided to come up with a bond issue to, I think, build Weber, if I remember right, was what that first bond issue was. And so the things kind of got put aside and then continued building with the school district. And of course, with the bond issue that recently passed, we see that, Hills is, about the only school without a multi-purpose room and dedicated art room, dedicated music room, and probably we could use some additional classrooms down there, because I think we have 6 or 8 temporaries right now.
We have, well, there are 4 that I guess you would consider like half. They're smaller rooms, and we house some Title I instruction, and ELL instruction, and we have one that is storing a lot of stuff that we can't fit anywhere else. And then we have 4 large ones, in that one has a 5th grade room, another one with a 5th grade room, another one with a 6th grade room, and another one with our special education and title outside the building.
So we thought, the FMP's ahead of schedule. You guys are doing fine. We realized we didn't make the cut there, but we know we're on a kind of proposed projects that come after that. And so we wanted to sit down and visit with you, see where that thing sits. How can we move forward together? We'd like to work to have a community gym down here, possibly a community library that we could use throughout the day and evening hours when needed. And so just really wanted to sit down and see what you guys are thinking as you finish up with the bond issue and the building there, and if we're planning out 2-3 years down the road, how we can fit into that. So that's kind of where we're at, wondering what your thoughts are. And
Well, I just want to say, last night with the DPO presentation, it was brought to my attention that the City of Hills gives the school $20,000 a year, which, thank you very much, that's incredible. I don't know, we have another municipality that gives us a cash donation of that line, or may I could be corrected, Steve, if we have.
For this building or
Yes.
for others?
For other, well, it was said last night that the town of Hills gives $20,000 a year to the school. Does Iowa City or Coralville do anything along those lines as far as a cash donation to any of our building?
No.
So, thank you on behalf of the district. That's extremely significant.
the school's very important to us, as it is to any
Right.
neighborhood, and this is our neighborhood. And so
Right.
we want to do what we can to keep it open, keep it viable, make it attractive for people. We've got a lot of development going on across the street, and a lot of available development. We've got dirt is being moved right now to start building some 7-plexes over there. So we think if we have a school that compares and competes with all the others in the district, that's going to help attract people down here. And we put in a water system a few years ago to take care of that issue. We've redone Main Street. We've redone our water treatment plant, or added on to it. So we feel like we're investing in the community here. We also now want to invest too in the school and keeping it open and hopefully attracting families down this way.
Well, we certainly have been beginning to consider what that next version or phase of our FMP would look like. You mentioned the acceleration. I think, Dwayne, you might be able to give us just a quick update on kind of where we are in the current plan and the progress that we're making. But we have started saying we need to start thinking what the next phase of work looks like, and start getting busy with that. And I know the Hills has certainly come up with some other projects that were not included in that FMP that we're working on right now. So I think the timing is really good to listen and learn from you on what your priorities are. You mentioned the library, the gymnasium, and the multi-purpose rooms, and a host of other things that you had noted there. But so I think the time is good to get the input and get into our planning processes. And I think we're making really great progress on our current plan.
Yeah.
I think we're on schedule, on
Oh,
budget.
we are, yeah, we're gonna start a phase this year now. We're gonna start phase 2 at West High School. We're gonna start City High School. We're gonna start at Tate. We're gonna do Northwest, or not this year, that'd be next year. We've started planning, taking proposals for 7 projects that will start in 2020. And by 2021, all the projects will be done for the entire facility master plan, including the original sales tax and the bond.
So then we could start building 21 here? Is that what I'm hearing?
I think that's,
I mean, that's what I want, that's what we'd really like to know, because
Exactly.
If the
What?
leprechauns and their
We've
pots
still
of
got
gold
another bond.
came, then
why,
yes.
why would it
For
need
sales-
another bond?
The sales tax, the SAVE extension, we have leveraged that as far as we can. By
Right.
the way, I think if you did introductions, I wasn't here, I'm Lori Rutland, school board member, but we have leveraged the SAVE tax, even though it extends through 2029, we've leveraged it as far as we can. So that's spent. Even if the SAVE, do you know what I'm referring to
yep,
with that? The
yep.
sale, the 1 cent sales tax. Even if that gets extended by the legislature, we still can't borrow against it until, I think, what, 2024?
23 or 24 is what
23 or
Craig was been
24.
saying.
So the only way to further any building projects at this point would be to have another bond.
Is there Pebble Fund money that could be used? Why not?
That is all, first of all the money that was available for building projects also has been leveraged against. And then the rest of the money has been committed to what we call life cycle projects. So we have a replacement schedule for concrete, for, I don't know,
Roads,
playgrounds.
building maintenance.
At-
Your question is yes, but no.
It's-
Yes, Pebble money could be used for here, but it is not available presently.
So where are you guys at on a new bond? Because now it sounds like instead of 21, we're talking 25 or 26. We're talking almost 10 years out before we can do anything here, which we kind of got left holding the bag with the
Yes.
bond issue.
And I think it should be, you know,
I don't know why-
originally Hills was on the original.
Yeah, we were
On
going to
the-
be
on
a
the
400
original
seat
one.
school.
Yes,
Oh,
and it was taken off.
Well, you can
uh,
bond it, pay it back with
And
the sales tax.
That was, I had an objection to that.
So you could start soon.
But yes, it was originally, it was for every, the word every was to be correct, every. And it did get left off.
Just from a timing perspective, Tim, you could start as soon as, and I'd have to check with Craig on bond release dates, but when, if the first bond sale could occur, you could have the project in the pipeline. You know, if we were, as a board, if we did design elements for the project ahead of time, you could be ready to break ground when the bond stream was available. So if it's 23, as soon as that bond stream is available, you could be ready to go. So from a shovel-ready standpoint, if we'd gone through the design process and the bid process, we'd just be waiting on the availability of the funding stream for it.
And so how quickly would you guys be going to the community for another bond?
That's if SAVE passes. I wasn't talking about the
Oh,
bond
so
process.
So
You're
that's
talking about
saved,
the
those are
sales.
saved
We
dollars.
can take a bond to public, couldn't we, the next
Anytime
election
you
cycle
want to.
next-
Yeah, anytime you want.
You
So-
could, that's just piled on top of what we're already
What
paying off.
what we already have.
Projects
and-
are accelerated, but paying off the bond debt is not. I
Right.
mean, it'd just be adding on to what they're already doing, which
Which is,
may be the way we have to do it. And how quickly we take it to the public is not necessarily how quickly it's gonna get passed by the public, because
Right.
it is piling it on top of already accumulated debt.
You said the legislators were here last night. Did they have any information about SAVE?
They were talking, they were talking about it, and they thought that it was going to come up this session, and there was some optimism.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't hear from anyone, and I forgot to bring the question up, whether it was gonna require a new revenue purpose statement. And I know for me, it's difficult to approve SAVE to 2049, which would be my grandchildren's ability to spend the money, to spend it before they have, you know, they're gonna be paying those taxes, and they should also have some say in how it's spent that way. So I think a revenue purpose statement might also have to come along with that as well.
And
The
that
the other
passed
thing.
by the voters.
Right, and the other thing, bonding, again, now we've got Coralville that's at junk bond status. So that's gonna make it more expensive bonding.
Not for us. We have our bond, we already have our rating from Moody's, and we're at a AAA rating.
Yeah.
Well, okay. The assessor was saying it was gonna make it difficult.
It'll make it difficult for them, but not
It's
for us.
It's gonna be a concern because we're 5 municipalities, not just one.
I think it's a concern that putting on another bond vote
Yes.
and more debt, right, that will affect our bond rate if we just keep accumulating more and more debt, right? I mean, it's definitely less attractive at that point.
Yeah.
So again, it comes back to how soon could something happen here, and are you willing to do something here?
I think that's a decision the board hasn't really discussed. So I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, folks, but I don't know that we're prepared to answer that question with some real teeth tonight. I think that's something, it's helpful for us to hear from you what you would like, what you need, and then we would have to take that back and talk about it.
Just concerns me we're so easily taken out of things, but yet when we try and get back in, it's kind of like, well, you know, that's something we're gonna have to talk about and discuss. I don't know
Well,
what
don't
the
perceive
discussion
it that way,
is.
it's just that we aren't prepared, we haven't
I'm not looking
discussed
for you to
it,
say,
so-
yes, we're gonna do this
But
for
I-
you guys in
but I think-
5 years,
But I
but
think it would be helpful to know sort of what it is you're looking and needing, and maybe sort of your prioritized list of projects that.
I think the same thing that was in the bond issue before it was
Exactly.
taken out.
Okay.
Exactly.
We're gonna spend, what, $3 million here to add a gym, art, music, I think some
Well,
classrooms?
yeah, what Tim's referring to is the original BLD assessment of the
Correct.
building. And the board at the time, none of these members were on the
Right.
board, decided to do just the building code issues. And then we did safety and security. So we spent nearly $1 million, but it
That was-
wasn't,
Wasn't enough.
it wasn't enough.
That was just to make us
Right.
be able to stay open. That was stuff you had to do whether you passed the bond issue or
That was
not.
just to make
Right.
it safe.
So-
That's all we did.
So we
Correct.
can go back to that original list then of things that were removed. Was there anything else you'd want to have considered? I mean, has anything changed since that original list of?
Well, I don't
items?
think that original list had cooperation with the city to have like a gym. I think it was
Okay.
just a
Right.
gym for the school.
I see.
We're saying we would be interested in,
Is it Wickham that's partnered with the city of Coralville?
I mean, there's, what, you got
Well,
8?
Sam, Borlaug,
There's a lot of
and-
them.
Right.
Wood, Garner,
Yeah,
Wood,
well, and
Alexander.
I think too, if you look at what they did at Lone Tree
What is?
with their facility,
And Alexander.
personally, I would like to see all of what we do in the Iowa City district be the same way. The community's invested, the community's paying for these, they should be opened up, and the library should be a community, a town library. It should have the same connection as far as I'm concerned.
And we spend about $14,000 a year just to have access to the Iowa City Public Library.
Right.
Which,
right.
when they originally came to us, was $5,000 a year, so
Right.
it's
And-
tripled almost. I don't
And
know,
in
8 years,
a
maybe?
small town, kids should be able to pedal their bike down here, access the library, have access to the gym. The community should have access to the gym. I think what Lone Tree has done should be an example for others, that, you know, that you get true community centric with that school.
Bill, can we elaborate a little bit about what Lone Tree did? Because I don't know that everybody's familiar with
Right.
that.
Well, Lone Tree has they built a facility for their schools that has a community component. They have a wellness, or a
It's a
fitness
wellness
area, fitness wellness center that the community can use, also the students can use. They have a gymnasium, same type of a thing. And it's set up in a way that, you know, the community can easily go in and use it. It doesn't create issues with going into the school on a weekend or something like that. It's a true community school partnership. And I know a lot of times I'll ask Dwayne, you know, how is it for access coming in and things like that? And, you know, it takes a little designing because you want to make sure during the daytime the kids don't have a way out. And that, safety, security, there is that, but you also want to have it so on the weekend, the community can come in and, you know, that same kid can come, who went there all day during the week, can ride his bike there on Saturday and shoot baskets or do what he wants, and if his parents want to exercise and use the facility as well, they should. And so that's what they've done there, and I think that, you know, here as well, that's something that would be a great fit here as well. Another thing I want to bring up is that I think it's important that with what we do here for a gymnasium or facilities, that it have traumatic, am I saying, or it be a storm shelter?
Yeah, hardened shelter.
Hardened shelter like Coralville requires it of it, don't they? And on some of the buildings, I've seen it come through that then they put the
Yeah.
requirement.
Alexander, Hoover East,
Right.
Grant.
Liberty.
All up Liberty, they all have
Right.
hardened shelters. We've been putting
To
it
my,
in.
to my knowledge.
The new
and correct
Longfellow,
me-
the new Man, both have hardened
Correct me if
shelters.
I'm wrong, Hills doesn't have a community storm shelter or anything
No.
like that. That should be, number one going in with a gymnasium or what we're building here, is that it also serve the community as a storm shelter, because in other communities they require it of us.
We barely have enough space to get our students sheltered for storm drills. And in order to do that, our kids are on the floor face down under toilets and urinals, under the tables in the staff lounge, nurse's office.
This,
It's gross.
this building has a wood structure roof, okay? It's, and I hate to say it, but it's not the safest building around. And because you have a wood structure. And so the buildings we've done in the last 6 years, we've been putting hardened storm shelters in all of them. The current designs have them. So we'd have to evaluate this building and see what the real merits of it are. And frankly, I would probably be the first one to tell you, you need to think about a new building and just start over, because you may be dollars ahead. So, I mean, I'll just throw it out on the table.
Sure.
Instead of spending dollars here to improve a structure that you have to tear the entire roof off to make it safe, you need to start thinking about a structure that's new and done right.
Well, and to that point, Tim and I talked about this because it goes back to Phil's comment. If you really want to build it so that it's set up for the community, you want to set the entrance structure up. So if you've been in, say, Alexander, for instance, you go in there, and to the left is the classroom wing, which after hours, that's very easy for us to close that off and just lock one set of doors. And then to the right, you've got the cafeteria and the kitchen and the gymnasiums over there, and you could flip-flop the music room and art room and the library, and then you'd have that community wing in one pod, and you'd have the academic wing in the other pod. And that way, if you wanted to have the library open during the day for community members, you'd have that ability to take the kids out of the academic wing, supervised into the library, back into the academic wing. So you'd have the daytime safety and security issue taken care of. But again, that's a design element that you would design right into the building from the start. And I think that you could do that fairly simply with some of the processes we already have in place without a lot of modifications that would then afford the community the opportunity to use facilities, not just in the evenings and the weekends, but even during the day, depending on the utilization of the kids. I mean, I think about your PE classes. If you had a separate gym, you would not be using the gymnasium from 8 to 3. You don't have that many PE classes in there, so there's some flexibility there too.
I'm wondering if we went a route like that, if it would be more appealing from a voter perspective, instead of renovating or adding to an older building, if we're saying we're bonding for a new building. I don't know, I'm just wondering if that's more appealing.
I'm not
to
saying the
voters.
building's in that bad a shape, but what I am saying is it was built by volunteers, just the basic structure down here, and I commend them for it. But they used the techniques that they knew at the time. There were a bunch of carpenters came to town, built a wood roof. Well, we don't build schools that way anymore. So I'm just saying the structure type is what I question. I don't question the quality of the building or
No,
how
and
it's
I
done.
wasn't
Well,
intending to.
And the layout isn't
Right, and-
necessarily
and-
conducive to
Yeah.
having it as a community building.
Right.
Right, and Dwayne's got a very valid point, is that the lifetime, the lifespan of this building is limited. And when anything we put in here should be put in with the knowledge that this will go at some point in time, and that it should tie in, and considerations should be made at that, when we break ground and start putting new facilities here, that the thought is that when this one goes, we can put something else in to tie into it and maintain this school and this community going forward.
You realize I'm moving back to a building that's 101 years old, right?
I understand. I understand.
Just saying, some buildings
I
stay
understand,
around.
but it's a very nice brick structure, and
And
we
it
put
has
into it.
wood in the rafters too.
Yeah.
But we are
And
adding a
bats.
storm shelter. It has bats as well, but we're adding a storm shelter to that building and making it much safer than it was.
Yeah, and you've got all the land back behind here to build on, so you already have.
Right.
So, and so I guess our thing is, okay, everybody seems to be in agreement, we need to do something here. The question is, when can we do it? How can we do it? Should we start budgeting for it, or is it, I know we're gonna be relying on voter passage of it. Maybe they're burnt out from the last bond issue, maybe they'll pass another one. What else would be in there?
Yeah, are there other funding options though too? If it's a shelter that can be for the community, are there, well, I don't
Yeah.
know with the government shutdown, right? But are there FEMA dollars? Are there other resources out there that we can tap into that we haven't been thinking about?
We have made several efforts to tap into FEMA dollars in the last 6 years since I've been here.
Okay,
And you have to apply for the right to apply.
Right.
okay.
And we've been denied several times because most of the money currently has been used for flood mitigation
Yeah,
and not for structures. And what they're seeing is that a lot of schools are going ahead and building their own storm shelters anyway.
Yeah.
Now, the ones we're building aren't to true FEMA standards because they require backup generators and redundant heating and cooling and a lot of things that we don't think we need.
okay.
But the structures are pretty good that we're doing. And I
And
might.
then you have to wait for a disaster to happen before you can even access the money too,
Yeah.
so.
And I might just tag on one thing that Tim just said, and Tim and I had a little conversation before the meeting tonight, we were the early birds, but, the smart way to do this, if you're gonna build new, is to build a new one behind this building, keep this building in operation, and when that one's ready, you can tear this one down. That's the way to do it.
Keep kids going to school.
You have to stay functional. Are we gonna bus kids to,
No.
No,
so, you can keep functioning, you can rearrange the site, the whole campus between the school and the park over here and maybe Stutzman's and just rethink it and build a building and do it right and then create a new playground and new parking in front and you can have a really nice structure here.
So on the bonding question, I wasn't involved in sort of the startup of the last bond, and, do we do some studies or kind of
Well-
market analysis of, the community's readiness for, taking on another bond question? Do we do some legwork to understand, is it really viable to put in front of voters, right?
Yes, we did. And I think one of the things that we probably have to think about from that standpoint is, and somebody mentioned it, I can't remember who, but there's a whole bunch of projects that are in the parking lot right now
Yeah.
that were not included in the last round. So if you were going to, you have two alternatives.
Yeah.
One is to wait and see if SAVE gets reauthorized here at the beginning of the session like they're talking about.
But again, those funds would not be available for us to
23.
borrow against until 2023. Yeah.
Yep. And then if you decide let me back up. I think what the board really needs to do is develop another facilities master plan, because it's not just those issues that are in the
Yeah.
parking lot, but if you're really gonna do another 10-year facility master plan, you wanna look out and say, what do we have over the next 10 years? And what's that gonna cost? And then we can evaluate our funding streams. If and when SAVE gets reauthorized, how much of that's covered by it? And if not, how much needs to be covered by a bond? And then, when do you go out for bond and what do you put into it? Because in reality, I think you guys know this, if the only item on the bond is doing the school down here, and we have to ask the entire district for it,
It's not
we're
gonna
probably not gonna get that. So, if the intent is, then we need to do a facility master plan that has multiple issues on there that engage the entire community, then that has to be part of another facility master plan that shows we're gonna do this here and this in North Liberty and that's gonna happen in
Yeah.
Coralville and this is gonna be in 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, and people can see that laid out, because that's what worked for us last time.
Yeah.
Right, so we haven't not talked about the facilities master plan. It has been come up in
Yeah.
multiple conversations about doing the next 3, 4, 5 years of it. And I thought we had it sort of scheduled when we were actually going to have some meat and potatoes conversations about it.
Yeah, I think
Is
it's
it
in our
still
board
up in the air?
goals.
Are we
I think it's
actually?
in our board goals.
Yeah.
I will tell you that all of those various conversations, as humans, we try and immediately go to the solution. So even while we're just trying to do the planning, we're trying to give answers. So everybody said, well, we need to do this, 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 and this. I can't remember a single time when Hills was not put on the table as we need to do this from whoever was talking. So I'll tell you that there is sincere interest from the board members that Hills needs to get something. And unfortunately, it's not a tangible time and how and when and how much it's going to cost kind of thing, because I don't think we have an idea of what that is.
Well,
But
certainly if we're talking about adding on here or building new, those are two completely different things in cost, so. I think that's what we're interested in is, what is the plan? Because the time will be here pretty quick, and we do need to have a plan, or you guys need to have a plan, and you need to figure out what all that is, how much are you gonna go to the community for? And so I guess we're trying to
Jumpstart that.
tell you to do it tomorrow if you're not busy. When Storm gets here at 7?
But again,
Six.
Six.
But the timing is good, as I said before, I mean, we've got a board retreat February 2nd coming up, we're gonna be reviewing our board goals, how are we doing this year, what's coming up for the next, we have some other agenda items we need to take care of, we've talked about magnet school exploration, and there's things that we've said that we're gonna do, but the F&P next phase is definitely something we need to get organized on. We can spend some time on that at the retreat and kind of get organized on what are the steps we need to take and what the timeline and process looks like. And so, and then can keep you all informed of our process and timeline, so, because we will need input from you, and Dwayne, probably your advice on new versus add-on and, you know, building on this, and that will help us scope, you know, high level what the needs are here. But that then would also give us a chance to kind of go to the parking lot and see what other initiatives have already been identified, and are there other things. You know, I can't say how long it's gonna take us to do that work. This is one of, you know, probably 3 or 4 other priorities that we have, but certainly having this conversation, for me anyway, just underscores the urgency of understanding where we're going. And we'll know this spring if SAVE passes, so we'll know if that is a funding source out years. And so I think, you know, some things will be happening that will help crystallize what the planning process looks like. So, I mean, I can't speak for us for how quickly we'll have a new FMP together, but we'll certainly talk about it in our retreat and be able to come back with a little bit more specific information for you.
Just don't forget Hills.
Well, now,
Right, that's right.
rest
That's
assured,
right.
we spent a lot of time, money, and effort with that BLDD survey and everything, and I went to, I don't know that I went to every single one, but I didn't miss many. And it was district-wide. And we were setting standards that it was all about building equity and everything of that, and it was that there were certain minimums that every building was gonna make sure and have. And Hills, like every other school, was supposed to get those things. Now, there was a decision made to take Hills off the bond. And I, for one, and I've got 10 months and counting left with my service, but it's very easy for us to we've made a commitment with that BLDD, and I would say, for my part, and again, I don't speak for everybody, but we will make sure that those commitments are kept with Hills. It may not be as quickly as we did with others, but those equity standards that we set with other buildings throughout the district have to be met here, and they will be met.
We appreciate hearing that, so, I appreciate you guys coming down, just listening to us and our concerns. I don't know, does anybody else have anything they want to say, or?
Well, as we look ahead to planning budget for this next year, and you know, and additionally our 3 to 5 year plans, I mean, does anyone have a sense of what is the kind of partnership breakdown for, like, for example, the Lone Tree project? Like, if we're earmarking funds to, you know, hopefully something that we can put into a partnership, what would that look like for our budget planning?
What have you guys done with other?
I was gonna say, it really depends on how we structure the 28E agreement. So those are the kinds of agreements that you put together between entities, municipalities, and school districts when you want to jointly operate a facility. So we've done a couple of things with that. I'll use City of Iowa City as an example. So we've used 2 different methods with them. One where they've paid in at the start. So they've given us a lump sum payment. So think Wood, where they pay us a lump sum, and then that gave them the ability to use the gymnasium there, carte blanche. We've struggled, you know, in all candor, we've struggled with that 28E agreement with them because some of the things that they've allowed to take place in the gymnasium have been very hard on the surface there, and there's no requirement in there for them to pay any maintenance.
Roller derby comes
So-
to mind.
Oh, boy.
Okay. Elephants come to mind. So
You want to
Yep.
talk about the elephant in the room?
So we learned from that. So now when we enter into those 2080 agreements, there's an upfront purchase price to it. There's a pretty well delineated maintenance cost on an annual basis that goes along with it. It depends on what they're using it for. For the most part right now, the municipalities that use our facilities use them on a very limited basis. So if you're talking like North Liberty with Garner Elementary, they're using it for the before and after school program. That's pretty much it. Wood's using the Grant, or Iowa City's using the Grantwood gym more than that. They use it for before and after school, but they also use it on the weekends. So how we structure the agreement, because I'm thinking, I mean, in my mental image of it, you know, if I can see the library not just being a kid's library, but an adult library, if it's open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., that's going to be a very different kind of arrangement than what we've worked before. Who works the desk? Those kinds of things, we're going to want to go through and figure those out. You know, one of the benefits of having a little bit of time is we can put that into place ahead of time. We can go out and find other communities who have done that, because that's not something we've done before, and we can actually figure that out. I mean, when Tim and I were sitting down dreaming about it, I said, you know, boy, it'd be great to build a facility that had 3 pods in it and had all your city facilities on one end and all of our academic facilities on the other end, and then that joint piece in the middle there. And so then how does that look? And so I think there are other districts that have done this, where we can go out and we can do some research on them and figure out what kind of arrangement that they had with the municipality, so that's something that's legwork we can do today, and that can be ready to go. So then from your budget planning standpoint, you can look at it and say, here's the upfront costs, here's the annual costs. How do we prepare for that?
What's an upfront cost you charged other municipalities?
Well, can I jump in?
Yeah.
I've done a couple, my previous life in Des Moines, and we did a community center that it was also then a Boys and Girls Club, and it had a secondhand shop by the Iowa Lutheran Hospital, and it had a school. And so what we did was we laid out the entire building, and it's pretty simple at the beginning. You say, what part of the school is totally school? And the cost to build that is totally on the school. And what part of the structure may be totally in the city's best interest, and they only use it, we don't. So that's pretty simple. Then you get to the third piece between, and it's the shared space, and you say, okay, is there any addition, do you need to have a larger gym so that you can have rec programs? What does that larger gym cost in terms of square footage? So it's pretty simple to determine the use of the space and what the cost is. But the tougher part is the maintenance cost, utilities, who pays for what. Do you have separate utilities at each end of the building, things like that. But it's not as tough as it needs to be. It's, if you break it down in those pieces, it's city, school, and joint.
To overbuild the Garner gym, that North Liberty tab was about $500,000 to do that. So that then, if you've been up there, I don't know if any of you have seen it, but it's a double gym, so it gives us twice the space. There's some bleacher room in there.
A typical elementary school gym right now is 5,000 feet. And when we built the gym at Garner, there's one at Penn, there's one at Alexander, they're about 8,000 feet. So it's you upsize it that much, just to allow for adults to play rec ed and those type things, so.
If memory serves me correctly, didn't Coralville, didn't we have some assistance with
Wickham and Borlaug.
Borlaug? Yeah.
Yep.
About the same price range, or?
Yeah, and part of it is, we sit down with the municipality, and some of them will say, yes, we want mini bleacher space because we know we're going to have kids basketball in there, and I want somewhere for the parents to sit on Saturday. Others are like, nope, I don't want to pay for that. So we work with them to see what we can build that'll meet their needs. Certainly don't want to overbuild and charge them for something that they don't need.
Right.
Yeah.
Do we have information on building projections? We got North Liberty has really grown, and we're starting to see more building come this way. Do we have data on that, what that kind of growth might look like?
We will be going back out and having another demographic projection done this next fall.
Can you get them to get it right this time?
I don't know, it's like the weatherman,
That's a loaded question.
Yeah.
You know, one of the smartest things you did,
The other thing is
one of the
pretty
smartest
mobile,
things that
so
Hills
it's hard
did,
to pinpoint us.
the smartest thing you've done in recent memory is putting the water line in and upgrading the water plant, because that was holding development back. And that, as a developer, I would never touch it, but with that in, the school's improved, everybody's improved down here because of that water line. So that's an intangible that you guys did that will spur your development in the future. It'll help.
We think it will too, and we think an
Well, it's already starting
equitable
across the street.
elementary would help too.
Yes.
So
Exactly.
that's kind of our goal here.
Exactly, knowing that there's a community commitment to the long-term
Yep.
Yeah.
viability of the school here,
And the
absolutely.
school district's commitment.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly, I agree completely.
People have read headlines over the years. and
Well,
they've not been
and
encouraged.
I've been following it long enough to have been at those meetings when board members threatened Hills, and that's gotta stop. We gotta knock that nonsense off.
So,
as-
we could forward you, the last report that was done, we do it every 2 years. So if you would be interested in having that, we could forward that.
And then, I'm curious also what the margin of error is, because as long as I've been in this district, every time, and that's 16 years at this point, every time a building has been open, it has either been overcrowded the day it was open or within 2 years. So, how do we?
There's
how
some
are we
issues in.
compensating for
There's some
that?
issues in the process that's used and what they count and what they don't count.
Okay.
Well, part of that, you can't just walk into a neighborhood, I'm taking out these 20 houses now so I can put the school there because I know what's there, right? You've got to put it somewhere. There aren't people,
Right,
or there's nowhere to
right.
put it. This is
Absolutely.
talking about having space in the back to do it newer and better is a very unique opportunity
Yeah.
as opposed to we need to put a new school somewhere. Well, it's got to go out on the outskirts, and what does the outskirts have? Space for more building,
Right.
and then boom, there's a neighborhood there.
And I think-
that's a very difficult thing to not have that happen unless you have a nice, perfectly spaced area right in the middle of the neighborhood that's already existing, and that's not anywhere in this.
Well, and I think one of the other
County.
things that's really important to keep in mind is something that we talked about at the beginning, which is Tim brought up the fact that we've got modulars out here. But if we didn't have a weighted resource allocation model, we wouldn't have modulars out here. So if you look at, like,
Where would you put
Alex,
us, Steve?
well, but I'm saying, if you said that the numbers have been wrong and we've started out overcrowded, Alexander's a perfect example. If we'd have had 25 to 26 kids in a classroom at Alexander, we wouldn't have had modulars at Alexander after we opened it up. But when you put 16 kids or less in a classroom, suddenly you need far more classrooms for the number of kids you have in the building. So if we had, if the classes here, if across the district, we were looking at 26 kids or less in a K2 classroom and 30 kids or less in a 3-6 classroom, we would need fewer classrooms.
Even
So,
with that, even with small classroom sizes, okay, so I'm one of the 2 special ed teachers in the building, and at this point, I'm sharing one of the very nice temps with a Title I teacher. It's a great situation. Last year, I was in one of the small temps. It was also a very nice workspace for the kids tonight until there was a mold problem. So that's still, I think, sitting there full of mold as far as I know. But the year before that, I was, and
It's not
it's
full.
clean?
It's
Okay.
clean.
All right. Well, good.
I hope
I
not.
teach in there,
Or
so it's clein.
There'll be heads rolling tomorrow if there is, because it's supposed to be clean.
Okay, well, I'm
Yeah.
glad to know that. I think that shielded me from her kindness. But, before that, I was sharing a room with our instructional coach, who was also doing Title I, another Title I teacher, and myself. And, I had a corner. I didn't have walls to put anything on. I couldn't put up our goals or our,
So,
core. or-
Can I speak on that a little bit? Steve, when you are talking about that, so if we were singletons,
We need more than
kindergarten-
just classroom spaces.
kindergarten through
Yeah.
6th grade, that would be 7 classrooms. We have 4 in this pod, 4 in this pod, so
Yeah.
that leaves 1 room available. And then to think about that, we have,
and maybe just to interrupt you, I wasn't necessarily talking about Hills as a whole. She was saying that when we build buildings, they automatically open up
Okay.
overcrowded. So if you look across the district, much of the overcrowding that we have in our buildings right now is because attendance zones were based on the number of kids
Right.
that we were going to put in a building before we put the weighted resource allocation model in place. And when we did, especially in a large building, where you might have 2 sections that now becomes 3 sections, Well, that's 6 additional classrooms that suddenly I need in a building like Alexander that I didn't have before. So it wasn't that the board at the time or the administrative team that was doing it planned it poorly. It was just that we were given a gift by the board that was, let's put the weighted resource allocation and model in place so that we can better meet the kids' needs, but now we don't have enough space for it.
Right.
So,
The other
We're in
piece-
our situation, I'm sorry.
No, that's all right, go ahead, Lisa.
We're in our situation here, even without that, we are in a
Right.
pinch for space.
Yep.
We do not have adequate space
Yep.
for our
And-
kids.
The other-
and that was a deliberate decision by the board to actually zone the area that fills the catchment area to make sure we had enough students down.
And the other piece of that is we've over the years developed what we call a template or a roadmap so that we evaluate the building before we either renovate, add on, or build new and say, you need this many spaces for this many classes and for this many special ed programs and resource rooms and all that's in that roadmap. And it's easier to accomplish every element of that roadmap in a new building. In a renovated building, if you have a classroom that's 800 square feet, but it should be 850, it's going to stay at 800.
Right.
It isn't cost effective. So there's some give and take there, but we have a basic roadmap or template that we're using. And when the time comes, we're going to use that roadmap to make Hills right size is what we call it.
I know our staff would really, when you get to that point of designing and planning, our staff, I think, would really love to be part of that. People have already been doing some thinking, some writing. There were documents drafted
Yeah.
by our kindergarten team. They're not here because they got lost in cyberspace when the internet went down. But, you know, thoughts about an early childhood wing and how to, you know, maximize instruction by using physical design. with
You got a real advocate sitting over
My
here.
language.
But we have developed what we call site teams in every building.
Yep.
And we do have a certain number of representative teachers and staff people at every building to help us with the design. We bounce out off of them. We make sure they're happy before we even take it to the board.
Yeah, this is what I was talking about. We're wanting to get to, all right, what's the end game, right? We're trying to figure out what the school's gonna look like when we're all said and done. And back to the original point, how we're gonna get this ball rolling, and it's a big, heavy ball, and it's hard to get rolling, and I think that is a very important part that we have to keep moving on, what the school actually ends up looking like in the end. I mean, I think it's gonna look great, because I think we're going to do all those things, listening to staff and all that stuff, but we've gotta figure out when can we start it and where we're gonna get money from. I don't know what sort of limitations we have legally on what money can come from where in regards to from a municipality versus all of our other sources. Obviously, if you put money in, you have an agreement, you build a gym, and we all get to use the gym, but I don't know what else.
That's the beauty of the
Monies can
2080. It's a legally binding contract that each of the municipalities sign, so they get to hold each other accountable for the language that's in there. So that's why, whether it's maintenance or access or those kinds of things, it's all laid out in there. It's pretty clear, which is nice because I think it protects both entities.
And it's flexible.
Yeah.
I mean, you can make it work the way it needs to work.
And
Yep.
revisit it as
Absolutely, yep.
often as
We
need be.
renegotiate them with the municipalities as we need to.
I think, as a board and as Janet mentioned, we will be taking your feedback and discussing this at our February retreat. In addition to the other projects that we know we have in the parking lot, because, we all know the reason why we did the big bond with hitting multiple schools was to ensure that it passed. And I would love to see something pass that actually benefited Hills, because we recognize that it's not a school that is adequate for any of our kids or staff to be in.
Well, I think it's adequate.
Well, it's not
We'd like
as
to
when
be
compared
equitable.
to other things, yes,
Yeah.
equitable.
Yeah,
So,
and we've gotten along pretty good here for a number of years with it. and,
Hey, we make it work.
yeah.
Very
They have a great
we have staff everywhere that will
It should work
give
for
them
you, though.
something
You
to
don't-
make
you shouldn't have to make it work,
We
right?
don't
Yeah.
want you to have to just make it work. We want it to be equitable and something that meet the needs of everybody using the building. So as a board, we'll have to discuss further on what does that look like, what's the next steps to get us to that phase.
Well, I guess we'll wait to hear from you guys and hopefully move it along as quick as possible. Obviously, SAVE will play part of that, and a bond issue too, and we're just anxious. We felt like we've been left behind and don't have really a say in anything, and we're now left up to the discretion of voters again, so.
I
Well-
think you could start doing your community planning work though, as a council, in terms of like what you would like the library to look like, for example. Because that's, if it's gonna be a community structure, then there's gonna be significant funding that's gonna need to come in from Hills for that. The district isn't probably gonna fund, the majority of that if it's a community structure that's gonna be, so.
I don't think we're looking at it as a community structure, we're looking at it as a sharing opportunity.
Right.
We share the gym, we share a library. So not something that's a community, it's the schools, and we're willing to contribute to
see.
that.
Okay.
Kind of like the agreements you have now with the
Yeah.
gyms.
Correct.
Okay,
We're not
I was
looking at anything-
misunderstanding when he was saying there was gonna be potentially 3 wings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Three
I was gonna
pods.
say, Steve,
Oh,
that you talked
if
about,
city offices
like
were
a
separate.
city hall.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
Then a shared wing and then the school wing. I don't know that we're at the city hall point.
that was just ideas we were kicking around, and
Right.
something he had told me that he'd seen, I don't know where.
Yeah, I honestly thought you were thinking about having some city offices and things here as part of it. That was what.
No, I think we're just looking at the school. We're
Yeah,
worried about the
well,
school and
that's,
the kids.
that makes it easy.
We've got a lovely city office in a old building. That's a discussion for another day. So no, I think we're just looking at a shared gym, a shared library,
Right.
is what we
Okay.
would like to have.
What does a shared library look like?
That's what we need to find out.
I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around that because I just am.
And I'm not sure when we say shared library, that it necessarily has to have this huge adult kind of books.
Just accessible to
Accessible.
maybe even just the kids on a weekend or in the evening that they
Or
can
some
come.
computers that community
something.
members can use, or
Yes.
internet, or.
I mean,
searching
not that
or-
they couldn't have a section that's, like I said, we spend 14,000 a year right here, this year's budget, just to have access to Iowa City. Wouldn't it be nicer if we had a community library down here that they recognize that now that $14,000 is going into maintaining this rather than paying
Sure.
up there?
I
So,
did my student teaching at Clear Creek Humana Middle School, and they share their library to them.
really,
And
yeah.
it was never,
We can research.
Yeah, there are lots of
Yeah,
small towns that do that.
How that's gonna look, I don't know. I know it does happen in
It
other
can-
places.
right.
It can
They
happen
make-
without
They make it work
having,
other places and.
you don't necessarily have to have it. And I don't think Hills is a big place where a lot of people during the day would come in to it. And, you could certainly just say,
It-
the
you could
community
even say
hours
it's-
are this.
yeah,
or whatever.
community hours
5
are
to
such
8
and
Yeah.
such time.
Weekdays and
Yeah.
whatever,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to make it sound like I'm against it. I just haven't paid. I have a
Right.
lot more experience of seeing partnerships with gyms and stuff.
Right.
It makes more sense in my head. So
Yeah.
I haven't seen the library next, so maybe.
One thing I
take a
have
little
seen is
tour.
that in libraries in particular, because I've had this discussion in other places, is that access to the internet between adults and children is a problem in libraries.
Yeah.
So there are some logistics that have to be worked out prior to, and hours and those types of things, but most school librarians don't want to have full adult access for their children, so.
And I'm not even sure that the internet access, I mean, most people now have that in their homes, so it's not
Yeah.
quite the issue it used to be.
Yeah.
And maybe down here in Hills.
You just
it's
called me
not
old.
either, but I think there's a way to make it happen, to have some kind of community library that's associated with the school. How that's gonna look, we've got time to figure it out.
Exactly.
But,
And
Part of
Hills is a unique situation too. My dad was on the first school board when the school was built. I'm from rural, and we have rural kids and town kids, and developed that. And it's sad that a lot of rural kids are not, because of redistricting, aren't here. But I still have nieces and nephews that go here to school, so it's kind of nice that my brother went here to school, his kids are going to school. It's just kind of a nice relationship, and that's why Hills is, I think, unique, because we are our own little town, but we're growing, and we got a lot of people coming into town. The bank's a good business, I mean, they're very supportive. I work at Sharon Telephone, we're very supportive. Stutzman's is very supportive. So you have all those people helping out.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
How married are the residents of Hills to this structure? You just said your kids, their kids, our kids,
Yeah.
everybody, a lot of times I've seen this too, is that it's an older building, there may be some sentimental value in keeping the building itself.
Not if we have a nice new.
No, I.
Well, that's what,
Sparkles on that other one, or is that-
that's what they need to hear, you know, because
Yeah.
if this were a 100-year-old man building or Longfellow building, the reaction would be totally different. You know, people would say, no, you're not tearing that building down.
Because we know it's got problems and
Okay,
issues.
yeah, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
We just want to be equitable with every other building in the
You want,
district.
yeah, you want a commitment from the district to the town and a school
Right.
here.
Like I
That's-
said before, I had children in here for 16 consecutive years. My youngest graduated from high school 5 years ago. That's how long I've been hearing this coming back, saying, oh, we're gonna get to Hills, we're gonna get to Hills, we're gonna get to Hills. And it just never happens. You know, we're like the little stepchild that gets ignored. And
would
that's
say
a
I'm a-
feeling for a lot of people.
I'm a
in
North
town.
Liberty resident, and you know I've been there for 20 years, and it kind of hit the critical mass right before the dominoes really started falling, because it was a one school town, and a lot of travel to get to high school and middle school and things like that, and eventually it got to the point where, all right, something's got to happen, and
And I
I
don't want to
think-
get to that critical point.
I think
I want to be proactive and
Yeah,
not
and
have to
I-
react and say, oh,
I think the stuff that, as, you know, as Dwayne mentioned, that you guys have done, you know, making this an attractive place to come and be will help drive that to the point where, okay, we can't just do the hand wave anymore, right? It's, you're no longer forgotten because it's now a thing that is front and center, and I think that's probably sooner than later. I mean, I don't have my crystal ball out, but it seems like things are going in a good direction here from, you know, everything I see from the outside, right? So I feel good about, you know, the trajectory that the city is on.
Can I ask one more question? And I'll shut up.
Yes.
I mean, didn't come here to talk, but the athletic facilities you have over here, as part of all this, are you willing to restructure everything that's there?
Just speaking for me, I'd say we're open to any
Anything-
possibility
any-
and looking
any-
at it.
Because it might be moving some pieces around to make it work, okay? I mean, it's not just as easy as plopping down a building, tearing it down, you're done. I think there's gonna have to be some restructuring and look at this as
So
a
you're talking
camp.
like the ball field?
Yes,
that kind of
the
thing?
park, the ball fields, you have to look at this as a campus and maybe think through how it's gonna look in the end, maybe totally different than the way it looks today. So I'm just asking if there's any heartburn in that.
Council,
I wouldn't think so.
I mean, I think we're open to looking at anything to get this school built the way it should be built, so.
So, you know, if the ball fields end up in the back and the playgrounds end up over, or the school over there and the playground's here, something like that wouldn't.
I think we're looking at any
Well,
possibility.
you know, when we get to the design process, which I'm assuming we will eventually, that you need to have that open mind and just let the pros look at the whole space as a whole, and I think you'll end up with a better product.
One thing I want to mention, just so that you don't hear about it later and then feel frustrated that we didn't mention it to you, is that there's another question that we're looking on putting on a ballot to voters potentially within the next year. It's called the Pearl Tax Playground Equipment Recreation Levy, and it's something that requires community partnership. There's a lower bar to pass it, it's only a 50% pass. But it's a levy that would bring in some money to the district that can only be used for very specific things. It cannot be used for buildings. So it would not fund a structure, but just so that you don't find out about this later and say, well, there they go again, putting something to the voters and we're not on it. It's not something that can include any kind of facility. It's a completely different type of ballot question than a bond would be. And that probably will go to the voters. I mean, we are talking about it as a board, but if we're going to do it, it would probably go to the voters before another bond would go.
But there are some things with that Pearl levy that would fit with this, like
Absolutely.
playgrounds,
Yeah.
ball fields, some maybe before and after school care
Yeah.
kinds of
The only,
things.
the real criteria is that the facility or the money you use it for, like the playgrounds, has to be open to the entire public
Right.
and not just the school.
But I think that
So-
meshes with what you guys are looking for, So
Well, and
that-
one time we gave, what, 25,000 for playground equipment here too? Along
And we
with our,
built it.
and we put it up too.
Yeah.
Twice, we've
So,
done it.
yeah.
Hopefully we'll get back to that.
Well, if I can say something, this is my 7th year at Hills, and it's, and I personally am very invested and love it here. But there is a community piece and community support that really, and I spoke about this at DPO last night, that is very unique. When the council is sitting here telling you that they are willing to invest and do whatever it takes, that you know, I mean, that's pretty remarkable, and they're going to hold that end of the bargain. The partnerships within this community that we have, whether it's Sharon Telephone, Stutzman's, Hills Bank, Casey's, Atrium Village, the city council itself giving us $20,000 every year. Whether it's Stevens Erosion Control. I mean, the list goes on, and it's people who are so invested because they care about the school, the community, and the students. And I know, like, our enrollment numbers, when I first came, with preschool included, we were sitting at like 112 kids. And right now, with preschool included, we're at 230. And you know, that's 210 in K through 6. Yes, we're a smaller building, but I think we're right there with some of our other smaller buildings in our district, and we're doing a lot of good things, and we have a lot of community support that that's why I love it here. And so I think this is a really wonderful opportunity to have everyone working together and to have that vision and to come up and do the research. I love that idea, to start talking to, okay, Clear Creek Amana, they opened their library. How did they do that? I mean, there's some groundwork that has to be done. Like, you know, in my mind, yeah, let's do it now, but because I really desire and want that, but I know that we have to do that legwork to make it happen. And I just appreciate hearing, you know, you're going to reflect on it and think about how to get it going. And I just think that ongoing conversation is going to be really, really important to make sure that we all could stay on that track and have that vision and complete it together. So.
Yeah, I grew up between Morris and Oasis, and to me, Hills has always been a big town. And it isn't just some of the things that would happen in the recent past, but.
People might not even know where Morris and
Well,
Oasis are.
Well, and to be more specific, Elmira is when only the foundation can be seen a bit, so.
And I really appreciate all of you being here tonight to everybody to talk about this, because it's going to make an impact for our kids. And
your community. I mean, your investment is palpable. I mean, the investment in the community, students working together, that kind of sharing of resources and sharing of facilities is immense. And so it's been super helpful for us to hear directly from you that kind of investment and the need and the desire to work with us to make it happen. And so I think what we can commit is this will be on our agenda on February 2nd. You know, part of our FMP next phase of planning, and we can spend some time thinking what that process looks like. I'll commit to following up and letting you know what that
I was gonna say,
outcome
we
of
probably
that.
want to keep in touch and
Yeah.
be pestering you, but.
Yeah, no,
Absolutely.
We'll keep you posted on the progress we're making, and I'm sure we'll have bunches of questions as we we outline the process. Then we'll want to spend some time with you and maybe dig in a little bit more on what the opportunities look like and what might make sense. And then start strategizing on, once we know about SAVE, start strategizing on the funding sources. If we do a bond, we'll need to really rally our resources in the community, across the community district, to make sure it's successful. We did that last time. I think we learned a lot in the last bond, and we could build upon that for another one. But having our ducks in a row, being really well organized, having, you know, the story to tell as we go out and get voters to respond to this. I think all of that we can develop along the way. So perfect timing, and just want to thank you all for your continued investment and reaching out and bringing this out and having this conversation tonight. It's been great.
Anybody else from the council have anything?
We appreciate you listening to us, very much so.
Not to, I mean, I'm more optimistic after last night. Did you guys talk about the view of SAVE that we got from our
Yeah.
legislators?
Yes, we discussed.
So, I mean, that's, to me.
That would be a good thing.
Yeah, once I heard that, I'm like, okay, that really gets my imagination going and a lot more optimistic in a very realistic way that, you know, we can do some things. And Pearl will help us too, I believe.
Do we need a motion for adjournment officially, or we can just get up
You're
here?
good.
Yeah,
I think we do though, don't we?
do you?
We didn't call a meeting.
No.
You didn't call the meeting, it's our meeting, so we're
They're breaking rules, it's on
we're
them.
pretty casual, just do whatever. Gotta go, gotta go. Gotta go, gotta go. Gotta go, gotta go. Gotta go, gotta go.